All right, Yield Nerds, episode 163. This time I have unlocked the secret of making more money while paying less taxes. Watch as I play that game against that mighty bear in front of the New York Stock Exchange and take his money and put it on my side of the chessboard. Well, we are up to 467 subscribers. Thank you for your support. There are several playlists. The one I would recommend if you're starting new is the roadmap. The rest of them are organized by various topics, including Yield Super Bowl, which talks about how I think about yield, pre-tax yield in particular. So do your own math, and I want to reiterate that, what I express here is my education. I learn as much from many of your comments as you may possibly learn from me. Thank you for listening. Well, four parts in today's episode, as always. The market temperature, and we'll do a little check on that yield bear and how I intend to play sideways chess. That's a novel concept. And do some simple tax math. I'm beaten and bruised by the tax bear, so I'll tell you what I'm doing there. And then my investment thesis for the next few weeks. I can't see more than few weeks in advance. I'm not that smart. And finally, my holdings. My entire portfolio has not blinked much at all, and it is that little itty bitty, what looks like a gently sloping upward line, and that's how I think I'm up 1% for the year. The market is down 18. Ouch. And that's because I'm a steady Eddie. I don't take too many risks. Now I do have an equity portfolio, and that portfolio has struggled a little bit, but it also is recovering very nicely. Much better than the NASDAQ anyway, which has fits and spasms and up and down lately. And there is a reason why my entire portfolio is able to gently climb even though the bear tries to attack me. And that is because I have a minuscule portion of allocation to equities. However, I am getting back into equities, folks, and I don't like to do anything in a big whiz bang. But as you can see, I've increased my equity holdings by a quarter, 25% increase, and I'll tell you where I'm investing as well. Well, we talked ad nauseum about bear steepening and how the big yield curve is coming back and long ends are increasing. And I started looking at my own tax filing, and I got very irritated, and I started playing smarter chess against the yield bear and the tax bear. So let me tell you what I'm doing, and before I proceed further, I want to make sure you understand I'm not a wealth management advisor. This is not tax advice or investment advice. Invest at your own risk. So here is some very elementary tax math. Treasuries today, short term, pay about 4.3 something percent. They are state tax free, so on a pre-tax basis, treasuries are give or take 4.7. Munis are federal tax free, but federal taxes, depending on who you are and what your income bracket is, could be an obnoxiously high number. And so you want to credit munis with a higher amount, your last year's effective tax, in my opinion, not marginal tax, your last year's effective tax, and say that's how much the munis are worth to me. But if you can find treasuries, oops, I'm sorry, it's a typo there. If you can find munis that pay more than 4.3%, the munis will give an even bigger bump, because if you make 4.3 on a muni, that is like making 4.3 times 1 plus your effective tax from last year. So it's a really big jump on your revenue. And so I'm going to go on a hunt to find munis that pay more than 4.3 in the yield to maturity. And that is the game I'm going to play. Now, before I look for such munis, I want to tell you how I've set up my filters, because it's not that easy to just say, give me yield to maturity 4.3%, especially when you look at munis. You need to apply a lot of additional filters. So for one, most brokerages automatically only show you the best quote, duh. The next thing is maturity. Even here, you want to lay out munis by maturity. Now, if you pick a muni that matures in 3 months or 6 months, you do you. Generally, those are not going to pay a lot. And so you really want to look at the longer end of the curve when you look at munis. And we just talked about it. We're going to set a minimum yield to maturity that matches short-term treasuries. And there is a rule called the Minimis rule. If this word is new to you, please watch some of the older episodes of Yield Nerd where I cover it. So we want to look at the yield to maturity and also a price that is less than 100 because you don't want to buy at a premium. However, you can buy a muni at 70 cents on the dollar. The reason you don't want to buy, well, I don't want to buy a muni that trades on 70 cents on the dollar is because the difference between a 1/4% times the term left on the muni and whatever the price is fully taxable as ordinary income. And I'm going fast through these concepts, and my apologies, only because I want to focus on today and not cover the ground that we have covered over and over again. So if this concept is new to you, I would encourage you to watch previous episodes. But to put it very simply, if you buy a muni that matures in 1 year, and you pay anything less than 99.75 because that's that 1/4%. Let's say that there is such a muni that trades at $90 and it matures in 1 year. The difference between 99.75, which is 1/4 times 1 year, and 90, that 9.75%, whatever you make on that muni will be taxed at an ordinary income rate. So it really bites you hard. Be very careful if you're buying munis at a really steep discount. So I eliminate those. I also don't like munis that have a really steep original issue discount. That's because the difference between the OID and par value is also ordinary income. And you want to look at munis that are rated very high in terms of credit. And for those of you who are very lucky to pay alternate minimum tax, you want to make sure your muni is exempt from that. These are some of the filters that I use, and you may want to consider. It's entirely up to you. And when I apply those filters, here is what I get. And I was actually very pleasantly surprised to see these results. And I said, wait a second, there are munis that pay 5% coupon. And yes, they are callable, but hey, I have no problems if they get called. I'll go find something new to buy. They don't trade too far below 100, and they have a really good credit rating. That really piqued my interest, and I wanted to learn more. And so I started going through these one by one to figure out, essentially a competition to a short-term treasury. And this really made me dig deeper. Now, in munis, there are additional gotchas. There is something called a sinking fund. What's a sinking fund? If the issuer of the muni, a state, a locality, a town, or a county, if they wanted to call, but they don't want to call everything, they just want to call a small portion of it, they can allocate what is called a sinking fund and start calling small portions of it. Whether they do it by random, whether they call the out-of-state people first, in-state people first, I have no idea, and it doesn't matter to me. But at the end of the day, if the issuer is committing to automatically call small portions, I look at it as a positive, not a negative. And the next thing is the callable window. Many of them will have callable windows of 0 days today, especially because they all anticipate interest rates to go down. They don't want to be stuck paying 5% for the next 20 years or anything like that. And I'm totally cool with that too, because all I'm trying to do is make more revenue, pay less taxes in this tax year. Well, the idea, once you kind of put those lenses that I'm okay with the sinking fund, I'm okay with the 0 day call notice, and there are other things called special redemption features that say that at any point, if they want to call the muni, all they have to do is pay Treasury plus 15 basis points. What does that do? If the Treasury suddenly drops to 2%, Chairman Powell says the economy is broken, we're going to stimulate it, then the muni, instead of paying 5% yield, will just pay 2.15 and call it. Now, they still have to pay in arrears, so you're not going to suddenly get stiffed, but they will then, for the last period between when they call it and the previous payment, they just owe you Treasury plus 15 basis points. Those are the rules. If you don't like them, don't buy them. But I'm good with those rules. And then there are a couple of more filtering considerations that I use. I investigate each of the states issuing the muni to see if the state is in good financial situations, and you can Google these. I also don't like to buy everything that's a hospital bond, everything that is in one state. So I try to diversify in my own way, maybe a school district, maybe a sewer line, maybe a hospital, maybe one in this state, one in that state. And last but not the least, you also have to look at trading volume. There are some munis which have very low trading volume, and those are a little bit dicey. Because who knows, one day if you want to sell, maybe you do, maybe you don't. If you want to sell, you're going to be stuck with the low trading volume. Here is an example. Full disclosure, I own it. I'm not recommending you buy it or not buy it. So here is Henry County, Georgia. And I have a background in healthcare. I know this world. It's the Piedmont Hospital System and Henry County, the county hospital system. And they have a really good credit rating. They're in a good part of Georgia. The obligor is Piedmont Healthcare. And you can see that it's a revenue bond, so the hospital will pay out of their own revenue. And you have to imagine, are there possibilities that hospitals don't get paid? Sure, but if you are the first credit holder, then I feel good about it. Let me put it that way. Couple of other things I note: the evaluated price. If you call Schwab technical support and say, what is that? And they'll do a big loosey-goosey description. But as long as you buy it at a price lower than the evaluated price, that's one more data point. The yield to maturity is 5% for a muni. That I think is fantastic. You're buying it below par, and that checks a lot of boxes. It's not subject to AMT, it's not subject to federal tax. I wish I lived in Georgia when I owned this bond, but it's also not state tax qualified. So a lot of good things. It is qualified, and I mean qualified. It is taxable in my home state. It's only non-taxable if you live in Georgia and some of the other states. So all said and done, this gives a big win. And you can see that if it were called overnight, you actually make 8%. So hey, I'll take it. The last part I then do is I go to what is called trade history, and I expand it over a 2-year horizon to see what's happening. This started trading at 102, and it slowly has stopped dropping, and it's below 100. Thank you. I will take it. And in the whole idea in all of this is when Chairman Powell dropped rates, this shot up. And eventually, in a time that Chairman Powell drops rates again, things like this should go up. And if the hospital chooses to buy it back, you win big. If you sell at that time, you win big. And either way, you make more than the Treasury. That's the game I'm playing. So what is my investment thesis as I stand on this big pedestal and play my magic game against the yield bear? My muni thesis is very simple. Munis are like callable agency bonds, and agency bonds will get called when interest rates drop, and munis with a 0-day call and a sinking fund also follow the same route. If I buy them below par and I escape the de minimis rule, then I, in my opinion, own a no-brainer. Now I should be prepared to hold it to maturity. That's why I don't buy too many muni bonds that are 20-year. I buy the 10 and the 7 and so on. And if they get called, because I buy them below par, I get a big win. If they don't get called, I make more revenue and pay less taxes. And so there are a lot of, in my opinion, wins here. However, there are risks. What is the risk? If Chairman Powell says, you know what, inflation has risen its ugly head again, and I have to increase rates, then the muni bonds will fall. But hey, I'll still take the 5% coupon and hold on to it. Muni prices will fall, but I don't intend to sell them. I just keep writing it out. Moral, in my opinion, is I am comfortable making small allocations to several munis that are diversified by the base industry and that qualify all of my filters. So what are my holdings? I have now accumulated 7 munis, and I'm looking for more every single day. These munis are across the states of Kansas, Washington, Illinois, Utah, Texas. And so I look for specific kinds, and some are, county taxes, some are hospitals, some are sewers, and so on. Here's a Board of Education. And so the whole idea is, and you can see some of these go out 15 years. If they go out 15 years, I'm okay with buying the $97 muni. If they are only 5 or 7 years, I want to buy the $99 munis, all for the de minimis rule. And so I have my collection of munis, and here they are. And when it comes to equities, I've also started buying more equities, and I used to be very monolithic. I only owned consumer staples and rode Cal-Maine Foods to a very nice profit. But I am now starting to diversify. I am sensing some compromise in the air. And the compromise in the air might lift all equities. And so I want to participate in that. So I'm buying the dogs that have been beaten down in the last few months. Some of the strange ones I bought, still consumer staples, Wise supermarkets, Procter and Gamble. These are things that neither Americans can live without nor people in other countries, because Procter and Gamble owns too many brands internationally. They will always get that sales. Albertsons grocery stores. But then there are a couple of left-wing ones. For example, T-Mobile. I now own T-Mobile, AT&T, and Verizon because I figure even if there is a recession, you're not going to cut your phone line, and so they will make the money. And a couple of these are beat down stocks. Comfort Systems, which was something I owned right before the election and sold it at a very nice profit. It has fully ridden the curve and come down, so I went back to buy it. Modine Manufacturing does cooling of data centers, and you can't again live without cooling in a data center. Raytheon had a disastrous fall yesterday, and the reason they gave is tariffs. And if there is compromise in the air, Raytheon should pick up. So I've made several of these. Now, please realize that I do my own research, and I trust you will do yours. Thank you for watching Yield Nerd, and have a wonderful day.